Hey yo, what up to the retained fam? It's your boy Bushle. Please like, share, subscribe to the channel, and please drop down a comment below on what of your experiences that you've had ever since you started practice semen retention. What is also the knowledge and insight that you've gained on semen retention, and yeah, how far are you on semen retention? What day are you on? So yeah, to those who've been clicking my videos, who've been liking and dropping comments, I really appreciate y'all guys for the support. Even if like this is a small channel and I just started out, I really wish I could have been part of like the semen retention community much sooner before like I got to reach the age that I'm currently in right now. But even if I'm still in my own early 20s, apparently I'm about to like reach 20, like in the next couple of months. So I'm gonna be in my early 20s. I really appreciate the fact, like the spiritual realm and the great divinity and my guides actually like allowed me to actually discover about semen retention at a really young age, and I also got to be part of this semen retention community. So the thing about semen retention, like it's one of those red pills that you never like anticipated that you might come across with within your own lifetime, because like apparently like the first craziest thing that could ever happen to an individual is an awakening. So like going through an awakening, you actually receiving that red pill that you received, and like when that red pill actually like starts to actually sow in your own subconscious mind, whoever like was the person or whatever source that actually triggered your own awakening, like that ever since you go through an awakening, like how you learn to see the world completely change, like your perception of reality and like the perception of everything around you, in terms of like the things that are happening within society, like things that are happening amongst like your family, and also like in so many personal spaces that you're in, where is also in like your workspace environment. Like once you start having an awakening, everything like completely changes. Like it completely dismantles you mentally, emotionally, psychologically. It puts you into like this deep mental warfare with your own ego, with your own like identity that you've held on to for so long. So, but the moment now you come to go through an awakening, you learn to discover that actually, like this identity that you've adapted, this identity that you've held on for so long is not even real. Like this physical vehicle, this physical vessel, this third dimensional avatar that you're currently incarnating to experience this holographic construct simulation is not even as real as like you identified with. Like the only thing that is real is actually your own spirit. It's actually your own consciousness, your own pure awareness, like this divine spark that resides within you, and like everything else within this lower realm is all like an illusion. Like like even the fact that I came to discover the fact that this entire construct itself, it's a holographic simulation, which our own nervous system and our own subconscious mind is actually the one running the program of the type of experiences we have, like on this third dimensional plane, even the type of vibration that we emit internally. So like an awakening like is actually something else, and like semen retention almost feels like an awakening. If you've never had an awakening and you're watching this, maybe semen retention is one of those red pills that you receive. And even if like I once recorded a video about it and said like it's actually a golden pill content, like semen retention and sexual any transmutation is not just a red pill concept, but it's also a golden pill concept. Because like who knew there'd be like a group of men who'd promote sexual discipline and living an abstinence lifestyle for the purpose of using this energy for a much more greater cause than indulging in pleasure, than indulging in lust with. So like semen retention, it's one of those type of concept. Once you come to discover about it, like you really wish like every single individual around your own personal space could know about it. That's how like an awakening feels like, because my own awakening happened in late 2020. So my spiritual source that actually made me to awaken, it was actually my spiritual leader, my guide's teachings and revelations. His name is His Royal Spiritual Majesty Imboni Uzwilezwe Radebe, like the founder of the Revelation Spiritual Home, which is an African indigenous spiritual institution that houses and actually holds the indigenous spiritual ways and practices of the African individual. Like the Revelation Spiritual Home, like is the institution that actually is the one that has a significant role that it had to do with my own awakening. And I'm not the only person who's awakened because of the Revelation Spiritual Home. There are millions of Africans within Southern Africa and different regions of Africa, the southern parts of Africa, who've came to discover the true nature of the indigenous spiritual ways, the true nature of how your own spirituality as an individual can help you, connect with your own roots, could help you connect with your own source, help you connect with the divinity and the deities and the ancestors that are part of your own ancestral memory, that are part of your own DNA. Of course, it's not a concept that in African spirituality you worship ancestors, but in some sense you learn to recognize that you are here because of your ancestors, because they are part of your own DNA, a part of your own ancestral roots and memory, like the hereditary information of the type of experiences, the memories, the traumas, the suffering, the scars, each and every single thing that they went through is all inherently within you as an individual. Even the type of personalities and traits that you have is all something that has to do with your own ancestral lineage, and even the type of divinities that are residing within the higher planes of existence that are interacting with the divinity helps you learn to recognize who you are in terms of your own consciousness, in terms of your own awareness, and how your spirituality is interconnected with everything that has to do with the reality itself. So yeah, even if it seemed like I was going all over the place, but the thing is, it was actually Imboni's teachings that caused that the level of curiosity within me to actually to go much more deeper down the rabbit hole in late 2020. You know, that was when I actually started going down the rabbit hole into conspiracies. From conspiracies, I went to discover about the more occult knowledge, esoteric concepts that are also relevant to African spirituality, that are also relevant to the things that have occurred whenever I was growing up. Because even as a child, even if at those periods of time, when I grew up, I wasn't really someone who knew there was actually a higher source, or a higher divinity that is the reason behind everything that exists. I never really acknowledged the fact that there's actually a god or divinity that is actually the main purpose behind of this. I didn't even acknowledge the fact that there's actually various type of realms where there are guides and ancestors, or type of things that are unseen forces that govern reality. So I never really cared about those type of things growing up. But even if I never really cared about those type of things, not in a sense I was ignorant. It was there was nothing inside of me that made me to actually there was nothing that actually made me see why I should actually go into certain concepts. But even if I knew there was something that was much more deeper than what was presented in front of us, since I grew up in a religious society, I knew about religion, but the fact I grew up in a religious society, I grew up in a much more indoctrinated program society where everything here in South Africa, it's all about groving, it's all about smoking, it's all about partying, and sleeping with girls, and literally engaging in the most promiscuous, licentious behaviors and acts. So I never really cared about anything that had to do with the unseen forces and the unseen planes of existence, whether they have a role that they do on the collective social level, until late 2020, when Imboni one day was teaching the difference between your spirit and the soul, and actually how the spirit is much more older than the soul, and the purpose of the spirit is actually to climb the spiritual ladder and to actually acquire spiritual growth and maturity. Like ever since like I had those type of words come out of Imboni, it's like through chakra, like it completely like left something into my own subconscious mind, where now that was when the curiosity started. Then that's when I came to discover, okay, the matrix is real. We're living in a religious society. There's actually a group of interdimensional reptilian beings that are actually enslaving the collective consciousness of humans, and I don't want to really go down like into those conspiracy concept, but I know a part of like it does have its own truth, even if it's not the final truth. And there's also a group of illegitimate rulers that are actually manipulating like the psyche and like the mental aspects of humanity. And I came to discover even like the red race, what the red race is all about, and even having to discover the fact that actually sexual energy is amongst like this loose energy that is actually being harvested. Not only our lower vibrational thoughts and emotions, like part of like the collective loose energy, but also like our sexual energy is also harvested with this loose energy. So there's so many things that have happened from late 2020 until now. And every single time I try to tell other individuals about like the type of knowledge and information that I came to discover, like it was really hard like to present certain this type of knowledge and information to people, because at some point so many things that I came to discover made a whole lot of my peers uncomfortable by the type of things that I really like used to talk about. Like they actually like reject me, they actually like would push me off, try to silence or like try to ignore like the things that I try to present to them. And in some sense I didn't know like they were actually asleep, and I didn't know that I was once asleep, and I was trying so much to actually make them understand, make them like perceive what I've already perceived, but not knowing that actually you cannot force someone else's perception of something that is actually above their own vibrational wavelength. And at some point, that's when I came to discover, oh, that these people are actually asleep, and I was also asleep. And I'm not talking from a spiritual ego perspective, as if like since now I became to be conscious, I became more spiritually like intact with like unseen forces and divine matters, that I see myself 10 times better, or like I see myself on a much more high pedestal than other individuals. Like I don't see myself that way, but I came to realize that most people are unconscious, most people are asleep, and most people are actually uncomfortable with having to go deeper into like the things that we are meant supposed to go into depth with, because these are the things that could actually free us from the limiting beliefs, from the limiting self constructs that we bind ourselves in with, and like the type of like things that could actually make humanity much more greater than the current state that we're going through as humanity. And I also came to discover about like the collective consciousness shift in the Aquarius era. And like bros, fam, there's so many things that I came to discover in late 2020 until now that actually completely changed my entire lens of reality. And I might seem like I'm going all over the place, but like the thing is, I noticed like the way I've been talking about semen retention, like I noticed like it's exactly the very same way I actually was presenting like this type of information to like my peers whenever I had my first stages of an awakening. I remember like when I had like my first awakening stages, how like every single day, each and every single moment that I had an opportunity to talk to someone, I'd always bring up spirituality, I'd always bring up consciousness, I'd always bring up like esoteric knowledge and occult concepts, but they never really like take what I had to say into consideration, or like they were uncomfortable with what I was saying. Then at some point, there were moments in my life where I was much more high vibrational, and like I was able to integrate some of these practices into my own personal life. And there were moments where I actually like was much more lower vibrational, and it was much more harder to integrate some of all of this knowledge and information that I came to gain access to, like into practice, it was really hard. And I noticed like the periods of time where I was much more high vibrational, it was actually when I was unconsciously retaining. Maybe like there were the periods of time where I wasn't really aware that I'm actually retaining my own sexual energy, that I'm not aware that I'm actually cultivating this creative life force and vitality. And that what actually helped me during various phases of my own awakening to be able to tap in into those higher vibrational states, because there were moments where almost I could lucid dream. There were moments where I had like periods of time where like I felt like vibrational and mental and energetically I was transitioning into different timelines that most of my peers and most people around me, even family members, could not really perceive. And I never really understood like why did I had these seasons where I was much more high vibrational, where my timeline was much more ahead than the period of time where I go back into like the third dimensional wavelength, into the third dimensional vibrational activities. Like I never really understood what actually made me to be in those high vibrational states, and why all of a sudden there were periods where I completely got cut off from being those high vibrational states. And at some point I knew that I still had vices that I had to deal with. I still like I still had issues with smoking weed, smoking hardly. Like I really used to binge smoke weed and hardly, and yeah, fapping was a common vice that I actually grew up with because of like the exposure to the like adult material that I really got exposed to, and it's not something I could say I was really proud of. And I'm gonna be honest with y'all, fam. Like even like the type of girls that I fucked with, yeah, they're not really like the prettiest girls, I'd say. But yeah, some of them may had like a fairy, some of them may had something, you could look at. But I wouldn't say like I fucked with like high vibrational chicks. Like the type of girls that I fucked with also, yeah, it's not the type of chicks you'd prefer, to put them on the pedestal. But yeah, man, like these things happened, fam. Like these things happened along the way on my own awakening journey, and now like I'm getting to realize that, oh, it was actually in those periods of time where I was actually holding in my own vitality, my own creative life force energy, where I was in a much more higher vibrational flow state. I actually realized like somewhere even along my own awakening journey, it was actually like periods where I was actually retaining that also like triggered that seed that was planted into my own subconscious mind. So like I'm noticing that I'm actually going back like to the type of individual that I was, because there was a period on my own awakening journey where like I started going through the shadow work, where my own egos and shadows started to surface up into the surface level, and it became really hard at some period of time to integrate some of these egos and shadows into like my higher vibrational states. But whenever I was unconsciously retaining, it was much more easier to integrate my own egos and shadows. It was much more easier to go into those high vibrational flow states. Then I noticed like whenever now I wasn't unconscious of the fact that I leaked out my sexual energy, that I leaked out my vigor, my creative force and vitality. That's when I noticed like I was actually going back to those low vibrational states, and I noticed that was when like things actually were much more harder than they were before I started going through an awakening. Because okay, like growing up, I never had a lot in life. I never really had access to the things that I wish I could access to, that my peers were able to have access to. So like life wasn't really that easy. But I noticed like the periods of time where life was much more meaningful was actually in the periods of time in my life where I was actually retaining. And like now I'm noticing that I'm actually like going back to those high vibrational states whenever like I'm going through like these periods of time where now I'm actually retaining. Like even if I did relapse recently, but the fact that I'm actually like consciously aware of what's happening to me on the physiological level, on the mental, energetical level. Whenever I'm letting all of this semen circulate throughout my entire vessel, I actually like notice myself that I'm actually going back into those flow states, that I'm actually tapping into those higher vibrational states that I had within those on and off seasons going through my own awakening. And I'm noticing right now I'm much more able to integrate my own egos and shadow like 10 times better than I did whenever like I was unconsciously retaining. So I could say semen retention is definitely one of those concepts or one of those practices like you should integrate into your own personal lifestyle that will actually, like put you on a whole new different wavelength away from like the collective. Because let's be honest, fam, like most men are supposed to be retaining if we're not like procreating children, but due to the fact that we live in the type of society that we live in nowadays, now like the type of bros like us who have to record videos and talk about how life feels like having a full sack, even if it is a bit weird. I don't wanna lie, it is a bit weird, but like here I am recording a full video on like how life feels like when I have a full sack, and I could say yeah, life feels high, life feels high vibrational when I have a full nutsack. But then I could say like I notice that I'm gonna be much more able to do things at a much more higher possibility since now I'm aware about like my sexual energy. And even as a Virgo impact, yeah, like even as a Virgo impact, I'm a weekend Virgo, and maybe I'll go into depths about like what a Virgo impact really is like, because I feel like everyone is throwing these words around like impact, I'm impacting. Like bros, being an impact is not really like a thing that you really wish you were, or like being an impact is not really like something that you really wish like you are, because like being an empath is not really easy. And the thing is, for the last couple of months before I started being on semen retention, I've been trying to have like out of body experiences. I've been like down the rabbit hole into astral projection, out of body experiences, and lucid dreaming. Even if like the lucid dreaming part, I've been able to have a few like conscious moment, but I haven't really mastered lucid dreaming, and I haven't actually like had my first out of body experience. And I feel like I could use semen retention to learn how to have out of body experiences, and I could master lucid dreamings, and maybe I could learn to use my own empathic ability in a much more higher potential, since now like I'm gonna be now intentionally abstaining from any promiscuous behavior, from any licentious behavior, regarding to like leaking out all of this sexual energy and all of this creative vigor energy within me. But one thing I could say is that semen retention is amongst like the things that had a role on my own awakening path. Even if like even if like just even if like being someone who's retaining does not actually make you an enlightened spiritual guru or enlightened spiritual master, but my earring. Yeah. So like one thing I could say is yeah, yeah, semen retention doesn't just make you enlighten all of a sudden, but I feel like it has a role that it does to your own consciousness. Like it does something to your own psyche. It does something to you on the mental, etheric level, on like the energetic level. I feel like it does something to your own psyche and consciousness, even if maybe like the fact that it's not really like the one thing that I could say it's the one thing that could make you spiritually enlightened, but I feel like it has a role, because even the fact that when I go into like these out of body experience communities, I notice like most of these people who are all out of body experience travelers, they're actually people who are practicing semen retention or practicing some form of sexual abstinence. Because I noticed there was this other time where I had Andre 369, the alchemist 369, who was an out of body explorer. when he was on this other podcast with Ginny Dot, and they talked about semen retention. Even if both of them said they actually do not count the days, but I heard that Ginny Dot, whenever he tries to attempt to have an out of body experience, like he feels like this energetic surge start from the base of the spine until it reaches like the back of his own head, and like his own consciousness projects itself from the top of his head. Then Andre asked him if like is he practicing semen retention, and like they both had a small conversation, even if they didn't go in depth. But I heard them talk about semen retention, and there was another series that I was watching. I don't know. It's written Astral Doorway, and like there was this other like Kundalini series that I was watching, and there was something related to out of body experience, especially the one that had to do with the secret chakra, and like I could say like so many periods of times where I've been into the out of body community, going into like my own thorough research, watching these podcasts and interviews, and somewhere along the line I had to hear about something that had to do with sexual discipline or retaining sexual energy. So what I could say is that I feel like this also has a role that it does to your own psyche and consciousness. And even as someone who's just a vague or impaired, I'm willing to actually try to find a way that, okay, if ever now I'm gonna be consciously retaining, what would happen if like I retain much more longer than I've actually retained on my higher previous streak, and try to have out of body experiences as the long I accumulate this energy, and try to have like lucid dreams, even if I cannot fully do these abilities. But I feel like with this now potential energy and this potential drive that I have within me, I feel like I could be able like to do the possibilities of the things that I've always wanted to do, especially having to ascend my own consciousness, with having to actually liberate my own spirit and actually reach the level of spiritual maturity and ascend on like the spiritual ladder, as how my spiritual leader once spoke about spiritual growth, and always emphasizing even till today about the importance of spiritual growth, and also having to interact and align yourself with the spiritual realm. And I feel like sexual abstinence lifestyle, like being sexually disciplined and retaining and cultivating all of this sexual energy, could also have a role that it could play like into awakening these abilities. And yeah, to those who've reached this far, I really appreciate it. Can you please like, share, and subscribe to the channel? And I'll see you guys in the next videos.